Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski.
Today on the podcast, we're out in California with a guy who might be found on either coast, an All American runner, both in cross country and track in Ohio. A runner, became a lawyer, has become an author, maybe an aspiring filmmaker. Welcome today on the podcast, the author of the new upcoming book, The Frontrunner, Brad Fawley. Hi, Brad.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
Let's start with your origin story as a competitive athlete and runner. When, where, and how did you first start running, racing?
Great. I grew up in Central Ohio. 7th grade, went out for track. Fell in love with it right away. One of my best friends' father was the coach of the local track team at the college. He induced me to go out for track, and I ran the 880. Our track was the parking lot in front of my junior high, blacktop that they wheeled out. I went from there. I ran all the way through high school and in college, and then a little bit after that. I still run now. I still compete once in a while, but it's been a long career.
How important to you and how driven were you by competition with your friends or against other schools?
I was very driven by competition, and I think you probably recognize that in your own career as a runner and the people that you've interviewed. I love to compete. I became a trial lawyer because I like to compete. Rather than being a contract lawyer or a tax lawyer, I like to win. I like it when there's a winner and there's a loser. I don't really prefer to negotiate. That's, I think, in my DNA. I think I remember one of the first races that I won where some kid challenged me to the mile. And in junior high, he didn't run the mile. His brother was a great runner in high school. He thought he was too. He was my age. It was interesting because the whole school turned out for this competition. Not everybody in the school, but everybody I knew and a lot of his friends. And it was 1-on-1, and I beat him in a 5:02.8. You still remember stuff like that. But
Yeah, I remember a race I had. The one time there was somebody else in my neighborhood who was a runner, the only other person. And it wasn't until I was a senior in high school. I had been running since 9th grade. And this guy turned up and he went to the Catholic school. I'd never run against him before. And I remember that being one of the most meaningful races in my life to do that. And after I finished, I was so happy to hear that all my neighborhood playground friends who went to that Catholic school and not mine bet on me and won on that race. All right. What about your success? How long did it take for you to be winning?
yeah, I started to win, not the first year I went out. Around 9th grade, I became probably the best distance runner in the junior high. And it turned out I could beat all the guys in the high school too. Sophomore year, I think I broke the high school record at my high school. Was 4:37. And then the next year, 4:27 junior and 4:21.3 as a senior. So within my high school, I was probably the best distance runner from then on, from 9th grade on. Qualified for state and cross country. Senior year, I got 14th state. And in Ohio, they had, I think 3A was the highest, not 4A. Then qualified for states in the mile. I've told this story before. One of the greatest days of my life was I beat Tom Byers at the AAA districts in the mile, but I ran against that guy probably a dozen times, and he kicked my ass every time except for that one race. And who knows, he probably doubled in the 800 or the 880 and the mile that day. The next year, I think he went from like 418 to 401 in 1 year.
Wow.
His freshman year in college.
Well, you progressed nicely with your mile time there. What was the equipment you had, and what was the coaching impact on you?
I had a great high school coach who was my biology teacher. He knew exercise physiology, and we did the normal stuff. We did intervals and off season based training. I remember he had this VW square back, and he would put it in neutral and put two guys behind it and make us push it around the parking lot as a workout. That would really kick your butt, believe it or not. I look back on that. And we did hills and all this other stuff, but he was a good role model. He just passed away this year. I saw him last summer for the last time. As far as equipment goes, when I first started in junior high, we had those little slippers that were, I think they were made in China. They were just black slippers. I don't even know if you could tie them. And it had a white rubber bottom, I remember. And they were super thin. That's what we wore until I think Tiger made the first real running shoe that came out that I purchased, Honest to Tiger.
Yeah.
And
Did you have the blue ones?
I had the white ones with the blue
White
and
ones,
red
yeah.
stripes. Cortez. How's that
Yeah.
come back to you?
Yeah.
And I preferred Adidas track shoes. My first pair were red. I don't know what the name of it was, but they were red kangaroo skin. And I wore those almost all the way through high school and college. I just loved those shoes.
Let's find out about you as the other part of your life, not running. What kind of student were you? What kind of academics did you excel at? You became a trial lawyer. You're a competitive person. What was your school life like before college?
Sure. Good. I think I found that a lot of guys that run distance are pretty driven academic students. And all my friends in my little circle were all runners, and we were all pretty good at math and science and so forth. I was really interested in science and I did well. I don't know what my scores were, but I was an A student. Um, I loved science so much, I pursued that in college. Then afterwards, I got a master's in oceanography before I went to
Ah,
law school. I chose oceanography because it's a multidisciplinary science. You have to study geology, physics, chemistry, and biology. A lot of people think that's marine science and you're like Jacques Cousteau. That's not the same as oceanography. I became a lawyer because I was interested in environmental law because of the oceanography. When I went to law school, I went in with a master's in oceanography and I was accepted because they were looking for some diversity in academic background.
that's brilliant. Okay. Now we make decisions and these transitions in our lives. uh, Sometimes we make them informed, uninformed, and they form our lives. How did you pick where you were going to go to college and where you were going to run?
Yeah. I had a girlfriend in high school that I was smitten with. We were very close. And I was recruited by a lot of colleges to run and for academics. And I had some great opportunities, but it turned out that my girlfriend was going to go to Marietta College in Ohio. I didn't know anything about Marietta College, but when she decided to go there, that's what I decided to do. I followed her to college, and within 6 weeks, we broke up.
Not the same as Larry Corey's story.
Right.
Staying in town because the woman he would marry and spend his entire life with stayed there with him. Okay, it was worth a shot. How did Marietta College change in how you competed, the coaching, and how did that go?
Marietta had a great cross country coach who was also the golf coach. I think he was the cross country coach because he had access to the golf course. His name was William O. Wetzel. He was quite a character. He was a bomber pilot in World War II. And it turned out that my father was a fighter pilot in World War II. And those two guys just got along great. They're both from West Virginia. His initials are WOW. So we called him a WOW. He didn't know a lot about running, but he knew enough. He was also a basketball coach, and he made us do something that's featured in the book I wrote. He made us backwards run for 2 weeks at the beginning of cross country season. virtually every day, other than our regular workout, we would run 2 miles backwards on the track.
Wow. How
And
long did it take to ramp up to be able to run 2 miles backwards?
it took about a week. Here's the thing. We never had a guy injured on our cross country team. I never had a problem with injuries and nobody did there. And you think about it, you're working all the opposite muscles that typically would get injured, especially your hamstring. And in the book, there's a scene where the protagonist is told by his coach, you need a great ass to be a great runner. And backwards running will give you that. Coach Wow was fantastic. He culminated our backwards running sessions at the end of the 2 weeks with a time trial. So it was 2 miles backwards and 2 miles frontwards. I remember my 2 mile back time was something like 13:30. And I
Wow.
don't forget what the 2 miles frontwards was. And we did that all 4 years of college. He was not the track coach. I didn't have a steady track coach. They kept changing people over time and never had a great relationship with any of them. So it was basically self coached. And even Coach Wetzel really didn't understand running. So I got the books, I got the Lydiard book, I got the Fred Wilt book, and I made the workouts for all the guys on the team, even from freshman year on. I was self coached basically through college.
What was your ambitions or aspirations, or what did you say you could get? You were successful with All American in 2 sports. Was that on your radar? And did you meet your goals?
Yeah. One goal I wanted to have was to have the school record at every distance in college, which I achieved. I wanted to beat the other guys in my conference. You mentioned Larry Coy. He was probably the main competitor in my conference orbit. He beat me more times than I beat him, but I beat him a few times. He is just a fantastic guy and a great runner. Beyond that, I think the next goal that I had was to make All American in either cross country or track, and I was fortunate to do both. I didn't get to run cross country nationals because somebody made a mistake and didn't send the paperwork in at the right time junior year. So I missed that
Wow.
opportunity. I was pretty frustrated by that. Beyond that, after college, I had aspirations to see if I could qualify for the Olympic trials in the marathon. I had run a 2:33 marathon. There's a long story behind it. On an hour's sleep after a dual meet the night before, where we drove 10 hours through the night to get to the race. And it was a great experience. It felt very easy. I think the qualifying then for the trials was around 220, 222. And I felt like that was within grasp after college. But going to school for oceanography, going to law school, got married, life got in the way of that. I didn't have enough time to train the way that you would need to see what you can do. I think that's part of what my book is about. For me, it was exploring not what I could do, but what it would take for a person mentally and physically to achieve their very best. How do you find your limits? I think there's a line in the book somewhere. It's not about really the medals or the records. For me, it was how fast can I go? How far can I go? So I never got that chance to do that in real life. I had a chance, but I didn't take it. And I chose to do other things. But I think the book was a way for me to explore that.
Well, just one last thing about that. With the scheduling and life choices that made competitive running not something you could fully commit to, what about that competition drive before you got to the courtroom?
Yeah. It's always there. It's there in everything I do. I still, for a couple of years after college, I'd say about 3 years, I still tried. I was working 2 jobs, going to graduate school, and I had aspirations to keep myself in competitive condition. So, for example, I still trained for the marathon, but I only had an hour a day. That's what I allotted myself. I remember one period, I lived in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and I ran the Virginia Beach Marathon one year. To train for that, I did quarter-mile intervals. That's all I had time for. And I thought, what's the workout that can kick your ass the most, that's going to stress me out the most and maybe get me in the best shape? So I would go to the track. I'd run to the track. It's like a mile away, warm up, and I just run quarter-mile intervals with the shorter rest as I could, and then jog home. And I went to that race. I think I was running like 5:15 a mile for the first 20 miles. And I was like, I felt amazing. And I was drafting on these guys. I was in the top 3 or 4 in the race. And all of a sudden I just blew up. I'm just collapsed internally. And I remember just dragging in at the end. I think I ran 2:04 or something like that. All the wind went out of my sails because I wasn't doing the right training, but I
Right.
still had that drive to compete. And then ultimately, in law school and so forth, I had to shift my activities and my mental status to getting my degree. I still ran a lot, but it was just to relieve stress, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. You can run a lot of quarter-mile intervals in an hour, but not 120 of them. Yeah.
No, that's
Enough
right.
to train. Okay. As you advanced in your academic, still a runner in your mind, still going out there physically doing it. Had you read other running literature,
Yes,
nonfiction, fiction, apart from your training books?
apart from my training books, I remember a book I read in college that I loved. It was super thick. I can't remember the name of it. It was about a fictional Olympics, and it was about, I think, 4 or 5 different runners. I think it was written by someone who was English. It just seems to me. I don't remember, but it culminated in an Olympic marathon. And I thought it was great. And I loved that book. I remember going with one of my buddies, Al Meeker, who's actually a person and also is one of the characters in the book. He was a quarter miler and he had decided, I want to run the marathon. This marathon was coming up
Okay.
that I had run in the 2:33 one. I said, if you can run 12 miles, you'll be able to finish a marathon. That's what I told him. He had never run more than about 6. So we went out one day and I told him the entire story of this book that I had that I can't remember the name of. And the time, as when you're talking and you're running, the time just flies by. And before you know it, he had done the 12 miles. And a couple of weeks later, we went and he finished the marathon.
Uh,
Um, but beyond that book, I read Once a Runner, but I think I was 45 years old or so when I discovered that book, and John L. Parker's great book. And then I read the sequel again to Carthage. As far as running literature, I'm not sure there's any other fiction I'm aware of out
yeah.
there. That's what induced me to make my book, to write my book, actually.
Yeah. There isn't a great collection. There are books. I'm just finishing The Purple Runner, which is another book I'm sure you'll enjoy, and Paul Chrisman's book. Your book is fantastic, from my opinion. I got to read it, and it's one that I think any people who relate to this podcast and had a running career will relate to the psychology of it. And it's for non-runners. It's a great book with intrigue, and it covers, for me, so many of the things that have happened over the past 50 years, as far as it's all the way up with drug use, but it's also training methods and relationships and the hero's journey. So it was a pleasure to read. You have it there to pop up. It's called The Frontrunner.
Yeah, I've got a couple.
It's not actually available yet. People can pre-order it, but there it is, The Frontrunner, a novel, and it's a great picture of potential there. There's an interesting story. I've read about what you've written about it and listened, where it was originally going to be a screenplay. You have a wife who's involved in the entertainment business. Just tell the story of
Sure.
how it came from you wanting to tell a story and the evolution of that.
Yeah, glad to. My wife is Anne Marie Howard. She's an actress in TV and movies, commercials. And we talk a lot about, we watch a lot of movies. We read a lot. We talk about a lot of creative endeavors. One day I was thinking about all this and I said to myself, wow, I, there's no real great, like, epic running movie. There are a few. There's Chariots of Fire, and there's some biopics like the pre-movies and some others like that. I think McFarland about the cross country team,
Yeah.
but there's really not like an epic thing. Chariots of Fire comes the closest in my mind. And I had these visions of a runner running across the desert and these great races and the stadium and fantastic training sessions and everything. I thought, this is going to be cool. So I started to write it, and it was all about the running. I showed it to my wife and she says, yeah, but I want to know about the characters. And I thought, oh, okay. So I need to flesh that out a little bit. I worked on it a bit and I got to the point where I had a screenplay written. And I didn't know the first thing about writing screenplays, but I took a couple of online courses to try to figure out what the mechanics of that were. Then I realized that, yeah, you can write a screenplay, but getting it made into a movie is like, that's like winning an Olympic gold medal. The chances of that are so slim, especially if you're not in the industry, you don't have experience and so forth. So I did meet a professional screenplay writer, a really nice guy who we had dinner and he had done several movies that were successful and but he was frustrated with the screenplay writing process because he said that the studios always change the movies. And that's understandable. Actors bring what they bring to the film, the director does, the producers, and eventually what was written maybe doesn't show up on the screen the same way the screenplay writer envisioned it. So it occurred to me right then that one way of solving that problem would be to get a book made of your story that if it became popular, it would do two things. One, it might get you a movie deal. And number two, it would make it difficult for anyone to change the story. So I,
Constraining it that way. I'll tell people what you say is so true all the way back for everybody's seen Dirty Dancing. And I don't know if people saw Dirty Dancing 2 and 3, but it ended up being a spy movie in Cuba. And that's not that's an amazing insight for people that want to do treatments or screenplays and a very interesting approach. What happened next with writing the book?
I just enjoyed writing the book more than the screenplay because it allowed me to get into the minds of the characters in a way that the screenplay didn't. Movies are what you can see and what you can hear. So to convey emotions, you need to rely on the actors to bring that to the screen. And when you're writing the screenplay, it's verboten for you to tell the actors what to do and how to play the part. But in the book, as a novel, you can totally get into the characters' minds. As I did that, I found I had really enjoyed watching these people come to life and their relationships with each other and needing to bring in another character in order to develop a certain storyline. And then what happens with that character with other characters that already were in the story. And it all woven together into what it ultimately became the novel. And I just loved that. I wrote the novel and then I tried to get it published, which is really difficult. The traditional way of doing that is to find an agent who will then shop it out to a publishing company. So the way you get an agent is you do a pitch, which is supposed to be 5 lines about your story, and you send it out to these potential agents. There's a whole industry out there about people who will help you do that. I got literally 100 either no response or no thanks. Sports fiction is not something that I can help you with. And agents are very specific. They've got to spend a lot of time shopping your book. And if they don't feel they have the connections or the expertise to pitch your story, then they're not going to take your book. At the end of the day, I remembered an acquaintance of mine. Her name is Dadie Cummings. She lived near where I live in Vermont. I remembered in the back of my mind that she was a literary agent. And I thought, oh man, maybe she'd be interested. So I contacted her and she said, I don't do agenting anymore, but I started a publishing company. She has a woman owned, fantastic company called Green Writers Press. She said, send me your book. I sent her the draft and she loved it. She said, I'll publish it. You don't need an agent. We're off and running. Then as soon as we released on the industry newsletter that tells when new books have been picked up, we got 3 requests and interests from 3 film companies about making the book into a movie. And that's still an option. The guy I referenced before who helped me make the decision to make it into a novel, he and I are working on a screenplay right now.
Nice.
We have a writer's room. So the whole thing has come full circle from the original idea. Although if it never gets made into a movie, it's okay. I have the book.
All right. This is fascinating stuff. What about getting 100 rejections? How do you compare that to losing a race?
It's death by, what do they say, a million
Small
cuts.
cuts.
It's, you just gotta, I just kept plugging away. I made a spreadsheet when I sent the book out or the idea out to them, when they responded, what their response was. And I kept trying to find people who were like, the people that did sports books were interested in nonfiction. They wanted stories about actual people's lives. And that's understandable that somebody who's been successful at boxing or golf or baseball or running.
Or being Seabiscuit. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Those are interesting and I don't doubt it. And there are very few, as we talked about, running fiction books. As we also talked about, it's not just about the running. The book turned out to be a lot about relationships between all the various characters. I think of it almost as a love story or a multitude of love stories. Each of the people in the book has a unique, loving relationship with one or more of the other characters that is deeply explored, all the while with this fictional running training competition story, actually 2 stories that kind of come together and it culminate at the end of the book.
Without giving things away, it's not all roses and wine. There's some devastating losses and devastating failures and insecurities that people have to battle through, which is fantastic. And I love because it is a multi-continent book before we even get to the big races and switching back between cultures and everything. We talked earlier and some of the names came from real people. Did any of the characters, are they strongly informed by real people in this fictional work?
A lot of them are. The American protagonist, Russ Clayton, who's a young guy. It's partly a coming of age story. It starts when he's almost turning 16 and it goes till he's about 24-ish. That's me, a lot me. His father is me. I'm a father. My son's name is Russ. The coach that Russ ends up with, training with to achieve his greatest achievements in the desert is probably a lot derived from me as well. Funny story there. His name is Brad Coy. I took Brad Coy from my name and partially from Larry Coy, who was my friend and you've interviewed on your show, and we were competitors together. But also what cinched it was my wife's first boyfriend, or the guy she loved in junior high's name was Brad Coy. So I just couldn't resist.
Yeah. So what's happened to the real Brad Coy?
But
Is he?
there, he didn't take advantage of her like for him, and I guess that never went anywhere. But I don't know. Yeah, she grew up in Iowa, so who knows where he is right now.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the running in the book. It's a work of fiction and it comes from you as an experienced runner. I know some of the workouts you did, you took the backwards running was fun in there. It's based on real things. But for it to work for runners, not just as a general love story that has sports along the way. As I started, I said, boy, you got to get the running right.
Yeah.
And I think you did. It's great. There's some insane workouts there. Just the same way in Once a Runner or the Purple Runner, we've got people doing insane numbers of quarters beyond what you think a human mind is capable of. And you push the limits of the character to the extreme limits to find his. It was really enjoyable to go through those journeys because it wasn't unbelievable. You built it in a way that those crazy things that he did and the discoveries were step by step.
Yeah, thank you. I enjoyed writing those and imagining what those might be. I'll try not to give too much away, but I think my favorite one is the lesson of the stakes, where
Yeah.
Russ is tasked by his coach with holding his breath, then running as far as he can until he can't anymore, and then raising his hand. And then the coach would drive a stake into the desert. And this would happen periodically, as the coach kind of called it a somewhat of a time trial. It didn't have anything to do with time. It had to do with whether when you're running out of air, you can keep going. And this actually came from when I was a kid. One of my friends had a swimming pool. And one of our most fun things to do in sixth and seventh and eighth grade was to see who could swim underwater the longest, how many lengths of the pool. And I had the record because I remember being underwater, and it's a mental game. I know I had more air than I needed to keep going, but your mind is just screaming, get some air. But if you just keep pushing and swimming even further and even further, I remember that feeling. And that's what I used in the story. That lesson of how far can you go and hold your breath turned out as to not be a lesson of physical fitness, but of your mind's ability to overcome the fear of pain, the fear of running out of air, and what that must feel like. And it's only until you, as a runner, until you can break the hold that your brain has on your body, that you're going to achieve the best result that you can. And that's a theme that runs through the entire book.
Sure. The subtitle, Fear of Pain, would fit that book. I remember thinking, I would love to see that stake scene throughout a film. I think
Yeah.
that would be at night, running in the desert. I lived in Egypt and ran in the desert. To me, it resonated strongly. And also I've done free diving training and watched the free diving movie recently that came out, and the same thing. It's a mental game, the barriers. There's so many parallels to so many things that you get. And you obviously came from the position of, I'm not just going to write about training for running. That's great. Of course, let's just say it's not an evil coach beating up innocent runners, but there are some bad guys in the book, and that's fun. And there's some morals there. I think they pretty well resolve. Is there a sequel about this guy? Any of
Uh,
those characters? I think maybe not the hero, but maybe some of the
yeah.
other characters.
Yeah, actually, there's a parallel story going on in this book about two Russian twins who are selected by a pretty evil Russian coach named Yuri Grimlov. Grimlov had a backstory as well. He and the American Heroes coach, Brad Coy, who we talked about, were competitors 40 years earlier and raced against each other in the Olympic marathon. Coy was a front runner and Grimlov was doping. And he hung on Coy's shoulder till the very end and passed him and won the Olympic marathon. The only time the Russian beat Brad Coy. And so that backstory is resolved at the end of the book when Russ and Coy take on the Russian and his two twin proteges. The twins are interesting because I played a lot with the idea that twins shouldn't be different. And of course they are, both mentally and physically. But Grimlov chose them with the idea that they wouldn't be different. And he discovered how different they are and how their relationship with each other, their relationship with their mother, who's a strong character, who raised them to be honorable. And the test of that honor when Grimlov presents them with a doping opportunity is something that I had a lot of fun writing about. There are a lot of twists and turns there. I'm not going to get into any of that. At the end of the book, there's the two stories meld. So as the book is going along, the chapters somewhat alternate between the US and Russia, although there's more emphasis on the US side of the story. But I tried to keep the pace of those two stories working together. There are a lot more interactions. There's Russ's girlfriend has an interaction with one of the Russians. She's an Olympic high jumper from the University of Oregon. I don't want to get into it all, but it's all woven together, right?
Yeah, as you said, some of this was informed by people and experiences, but as I was reading it, I thought about the runners I've met and interviewed, and a famous world-class miler who dated a high jumper at the 76 Olympics, Joan Hansen, a pair of twins. It's a rich thing for people who have thought about these things and experienced them in running and life. There's a lot there. And the page turner quality of it. I didn't always want it to go any faster than it was going in the American story, but the Russian bits were page turning. It was what's going to happen here. And in a short amount of time, the proportion of pages dedicated to that is significantly less, but quite compelling and thrilling. I just loved it. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
What has been the reaction of runners to your book?
I've been really thrilled. So the way book writing works is once you get the book, you get what's called an advanced reader's copy, and you need to then try to get some folks to read it and maybe comment on it, hopefully positively. And uniformly, I've been pleased that every person who's read it, both runners and non-runners, have given me positive comments. People that have blurbed on it include Larry Coy, Roger Robinson, who I think you're going to be interviewing. He's an award-winning author and a compiler of literature on running. I was able to get Bill Rogers. I didn't do it. I have a publicist. He contacted Bill Rogers and Bill Rogers agreed to read it. I was over the moon about that. And he gave me some very positive comments. He handed it off to Bill Hodge, who is another fantastic runner. He handed his copy off to him, and Bill has contacted me and we've talked about the book. He's enjoyed it. You read it, Matt, and you gave me positive comments. My publicist was able to contact Nicholas Thompson, who is not only a record holding ultra age group runner, but he's the CEO of the Atlantic. And
Wow.
yeah, and he loved the book. He read it in one sitting, apparently on a flight from Italy or somewhere. And he gave some positive comments. So I'm thrilled. I'm hoping other runners and non-runners will ultimately enjoy it as well.
You did some readings on the Beers and Done podcast. I'm going to read some of the blurbs that have been prepared for the Frontrunner. Because you reading them, well, you might be just a little bit embarrassed by them. Praise for the Frontrunner. The Frontrunner is an intense look at the beauty and power of distance running and racing. What are we capable of? Brad Fawley explores this quintessential question we all wonder about. Bill Rogers, Olympian and former American record holder in the marathon, 4-time winner of Boston and New York City marathons. Pretty good recommendation. Nicholas Thompson, CEO of The Atlantic. A wonderful, touching, twisting novel about running and so much more. It captures beautifully what it means to move quickly through space and what it means to train. I couldn't put it down. Roger Robinson, award-winning author, Boston and New York Masters record holder. Brad Fawley's first novel, Aims High, a well-crafted, realistic story of overcoming loss through running, morphs into the ultimate Olympic golden fantasy. Epic training, reclusive coach, cheating Russians, miraculous victories, sexy high jumper, even a fan zone ghost. This is Once a Runner on steroids. One more, a book that rivals the cult classic Once a Runner. Fawley captures everything runners face, from the challenges of training and racing at all levels to life and love. Brad's writing cannot be beat. Larry Coy, 6 times All American distance runner.
These are fantastic statements people have made. I'm just so grateful to have these people in my life and supporting me. Now, what a great experience. I'm interacting with heroes of my life. Bill Rogers, I've got emails from Bill Rogers. It's amazing.
I was talking to Ron Tabb, excellent runner and marathon champion. He said that too in his running career when he reached the elite level. And he said, I'm on the line with these guys I looked at from afar, never dreaming, and I'm competing with them. And that's the same thing. I got to say, you're a great writer, Brad, but I'm not sure you could have written any better blurbs and appreciation for your own book. Those are fantastic.
Yeah.
There was a little bit of a giveaway there in terms of one of the Russ's pursuit of the Olympic quad, which everyone familiar who loves the history of running, of course, goes back and remembers the triples and the doubles that have been done and attempted. And that was just a wonderful choice. I just thought it was a great thing to put this at What If. The Purple Runner, as another book, talks about a person pursuing what back then seemed impossible, a 2-hour marathon. But maybe this goal one day we'll see somebody do it. What's next for you in terms of when are you going to go running next? And when are you going to expect this project to wind down that you would go on to any other project?
When am I going to go running next? Probably after we finish the podcast.
Right.
Yeah. The schedule right now, I'm consumed with the rollout of the book right now, with getting the publicity done, lining up readings and signings and so forth. Right now, the launch of the book is going to be at the Boston Marathon. My publisher has a booth at the expo where all the runners have to go get their numbers. So 30,000 runners are going to go through the expo to get their numbers. I'm hoping they'll find a minute and come by the Green Writers Press booth. We're going to have copies there. I'll be signing copies. And one of the fun things I'm going to do is I've decided for every copy I sign for somebody else, I'm going to have the person I signed it for sign one of my copies. I'm going to have a book that's got on some page every person I ever signed a copy for with their signature.
Wow. At least from that day in April. Yes. Oh, for all your future signings. That's a brilliant idea.
Just carry it around and do that. Then I've got a signing at the Barnes & Noble and Natick, which is on the marathon route on April 13th, which is during the ramp up. That's at 4:00. And then after that, there's a series of readings and signings. My publisher has a booth at the Burlington Vermont Marathon at the end of May. So I'll be doing some things up there. All that's taken me off course of writing, which is a little frustrating, but I do have a couple of different novels in the works. I've written a short story and finished that recently. And I've got, as you mentioned, the sequel idea it has been outlined, and I'm very excited about it. And I drifted off from talking about that before, but one of the Russian twins' name is Sergei Pushkin, who is a complex character. And I became very intrigued with his story and the aftermath of what his life might be like following the events that take place in the Frontrunner. And that is what I think the sequel is going to be about. All the other characters will still be in the sequel, but I think it's going to focus on what life might be like for him after well, I'm not going to give it away, but somewhat traumatic events of the end of the book.
Yeah, I don't doubt this is going to be a great success. You planned it well, strategized well. You've had some breaks. It sounds such a great reception. It seems like your career as a lawyer is in jeopardy.
I'm not complaining. Yeah, I'd rather be writing. If somebody asked me, basically, since college on, if you could spend your day doing something, what would you do? I've said this forever. I'd love to just get up, get a cup of coffee and write, and then take the afternoon off and go run or play my guitar or whatever. But I just love the process of it. As a lawyer, spending sometimes 12 hours a day writing, I'd rather be doing creative writing than briefs, but I have the discipline to sit in front of the computer. And it really doesn't take discipline. Once you're in the groove and the story is developing, I hate to put it down. So it's a lot of fun.
I did run the steeple. I won the Ontario steeplechase M60 Masters right before COVID.
Nice.
I have recovered enough to be an old fat guy that can still race. And I tell you what, honestly, I ran the 800 meters when I was 61.
Yeah.
And I hadn't run a time trial. And I was standing on the line with all these guys saying, I'm not sure I can go under 3 minutes, but I'm in lane 1 because I'm the slowest seed. And they're, oh, we're going to go too. And I'm okay. I really don't know what's happening, but let's all have fun. It's a great experience running with Masters. At the end of the first lap, I can either be in 5th or just a race. I'm going to the front. And what the joy. Wow. That was fun. I hope you can run a race someday where you're in the mix. My God, is that fun? It doesn't matter. The Masters athletics is fascinating. Of course, Roger Robinson is a world champion in Masters, but it's a great, interesting experience. The camaraderie at that level
is like that. It's not any different.
No, it's spectacular.
You forget about the clock. The feeling you think you're flying. You're 60 years old. And
oh my God!
You're running just the same speed you were when you're 18, don't you?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You get to the clock and say, "Wait a minute, that is half as fast as you know." But it didn't matter. Didn't matter.
So, my wife and I run almost every day together. We usually do 4 miles. Sometimes I'll go out on my own, do 6 or 7. Every once in a while, I'll do some intervals, and they're not long. I'll do 200 yards. And I use my Garmin. It's not marked out. And I go back to the house and I download my Garmin and I go, I was like all out, like sprinting as hard as I possibly can, 100%. And I'm like 550 a mile. Oh shit. I did that for a marathon once. And how is that possible? You know?
Yeah.
It's really weird of what time can do to you. But the other weird thing is, like you said, when you're doing it, you could be going 9-10 minutes a mile and you feel like you're going 6 minutes a mile like you used to. It's just, it's such a cool thing. And so you got to forget about the clock. What was your time in the 800?
I was 2:47.
That's fantastic.
And a guy who won the age group below me said, "You're like me. you want to keep doing this. You need to lose 15 pounds. Your time will go right down. I said, I don't know how badly I want it. 15 pounds or how even remotely possible, but what a great community. And that led to meeting lots of great people in this community. No doubt you've changed a lot of lives and helped a lot of people, but with this book and what's coming, I'm sure you'll be able to reach a giant audience of people who love the things that you love. And that's just going to be a great story of yours.
Oh man, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Matt. I've been offering, and it's going to start with Marietta where I went. The coach is interested in me coming to Marietta and having the track team. They have a big track team now, track and cross country teams, and do a reading at Marietta College. I am thinking once the book comes out, I'm going to be offering this, and I can't fly all over the country to go to every college, but I can do virtual readings, answer questions. And for people that have bought the book and read it already, I can be a little bit more open about what's going on, why this character did this, what's the meaning of that. And I'm looking forward to that kind of thing. I'm going to do a book club via Zoom for someone in my high school class who's got a book club in Florida. So I think I'm going to, at some point, stop running around, but do that grassroots kind of publicity by contacting teams. So if you run into any coaches.
Yeah, I do. I will ask all of them to do that. And the people that have book clubs, the same thing. I get it. Yeah, I can do all that. There is a community of these people that are still coaching that right up that alley. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Thanks for all your time. This is great.
Thank you for asking and thank you for having me. It's been great to meet you personally this way.
I like the idea of the book being part of what this podcast looks at and says, hey, we'll look at the old books too, but it's not a book that feels like it's modern and also written by somebody who ran 40, 50 years ago is what's magic to me.
Oh, thank you. Well, this has been great. I hope we get to meet in person someday, and I expect we will.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Brad. Talk to you again.
Thank you, Matt. All right. Take care.
I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.